Welcome, dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, a soft sleep story for the quiet edge of night, a bedtime story made for slow breathing, heavy eyelids, and the tender feeling of drifting beyond the day. And tonight, in this relaxing story, we begin a long and unhurried journey through 100 of the most calming facts about the brightest objects in the universe, not as a lesson to memorize, but as a gentle bedtime lantern, glowing faintly beside you as you settle, soften, and fall asleep. So before we travel anywhere at all, allow yourself to become wonderfully still, letting your body rest exactly as it is, letting the surface beneath you hold every small effort you no longer need to carry. And as this nighttime story unfolds, notice how the room around you asks nothing more of you, how the air can simply touch your skin, how the weight of your arms and legs can quietly sink, and how even your thoughts, those bright little comets of the waking mind, can begin to slow, dim, and pass without needing to be followed. Because this is a place for deep sleep, for calming narration, for a gentle bedtime descent into softness, and there is nothing to solve here, nowhere to rush, nowhere to arrive except this peaceful moment, this slow floating threshold where science becomes serene and knowledge becomes a cradle. And now, as we begin, imagine yourself resting inside a silent observatory made not of stone or metal, but of velvety darkness and distant silver light, with a vast ceiling of stars above you, and a quiet, invisible current carrying you forward, ever so slowly, through the cosmic night. And the first fact arrives like a warm breath. Brightness is not always about being the biggest, but about energy, distance, and how light reaches the eye. So sometimes a small nearby object glows more strongly to us than something grand and far away, which is why, from Earth, our own sun is the brightest object in our sky, filling the daytime with such radiance that all the stars vanish behind its glow, even though those stars remain patiently in place beyond the blue. And after the sun, the moon feels bright to us, not because it makes its own light, but because it reflects sunlight with a quiet loyalty, turning borrowed brightness into a silver companion for countless nights, while Venus, our evening and morning jewel, can shine more brilliantly than any star in the dark, because its thick clouds reflect sunlight so efficiently that it becomes a lantern at the horizon, a small pearl of steadiness in the dusk. And when true stars appear, Sirius rises as the brightest star in Earth's night sky, not the largest of all stars, but close enough and luminous enough to seem like a cool blue-white note held in the darkness. While far beyond Sirius, there are stars so intrinsically radiant that if they traded places with our sun, they would transform our skies into something almost dreamlike. And among them are blue supergiants, stars that burn hot and lavishly, pouring out enormous amounts of light in a brief and brilliant youth, like candles that choose brightness over longevity. Yet even these are only the beginning, because some of the brightest objects in the universe are not single stars at all, but entire systems of astonishing power. And among the calmest facts to remember is that light itself can travel for millions or billions of years, just to arrive softly at an eye closing in bed, meaning that every bright object we notice is also a message from the past, a patient traveler crossing time to reach us at exactly this quiet hour. Quasars, for instance, are among the brightest persistent objects known, outshining whole galaxies from the compact hearts of ancient systems where matter spirals inward around supermassive black holes and releases immense energy before crossing the final boundary, creating a brilliance so extraordinary that something relatively compact can appear visible across unimaginable distances. And yet, in this story, even that fact need not feel fierce, because we are not rushing toward violence or noise, only observing from a peaceful distance, as though watching a lighthouse from a still sea, its beam turning slowly through the dark. There are also galaxies whose combined starlight creates a soft grandeur, great islands of suns gathered into spiral and elliptical forms. And some are bright because they are rich with newborn stars, while others shine with the collected glow of ancient billions. A reminder that brightness can come from youth or age, from heat or sheer abundance, from single fire or gentle multitude. And then there are supernovae, those rare moments when a star can briefly rival the light of a galaxy. Though tonight we hold even this with softness, not as an explosion to fear, but as a radiant transition written into the long life cycle of the cosmos. One of the ways the universe scatters heavier elements into space, so that future stars, planets, oceans, stones, and living beings may one day exist, meaning that even the calm body resting here under blankets has a quiet kinship with ancient stellar light. And so the facts continue to arrive in a hush. Some of the brightest nebulae shine because nearby stars energize their gas, making clouds glow in pinks, reds, and blues. Some pulsars seem to flash with clock-like precision as they spin, turning motion into rhythm. Some clusters of galaxies become bright not only through stars, but through hot gas and energetic processes unfolding on scales so wide that the mind almost gives up measuring them and instead simply floats. And this, perhaps, is the most relaxing truth of all, that the universe is full of brightness without hurry, full of luminous things that have been shining long before this night and will go on shining without asking anything from you. And as you listen to this sleep story, this bedtime story, this gentle sequence of cosmic facts shaped into a relaxing story for deep sleep, you do not need to hold onto every detail, because each one can pass over you like moonlight over water. Each fact a soft gleam, each image a distant and friendly ember, until the brightest objects in the universe no longer feel remote or enormous, but tender, patient, and quiet, like lanterns hung very far away in a house with many rooms. And you, for now, may simply drift among them, lighter than thought, slower than time, carried deeper into rest by the calm certainty that the cosmos is vast, luminous, and at peace tonight, now that the first soft layer of night has settled over your thoughts. Let us drift a little farther from Earth, gently and without effort, as though the silence itself were carrying us. And from here, the bright objects of the universe begin to arrange themselves, not as sharp points or distant mysteries, but as quiet lanterns suspended in an endless, velvety dark, each one offering a soothing fact, a patient shimmer, a reason to relax more deeply into this sleep story, this bedtime story, this nighttime story made for the slow closing of the mind. And one of the most calming things to remember is that brightness in the sky is always a relationship, never a boast, never a competition, but a tender meeting between light and distance, between what shines and what is near enough, clear enough, or reflective enough to be noticed by a creature resting on a small planet. And so Venus, that lovely evening and morning light, seems almost impossibly radiant, not because it burns like a star, but because it wraps itself in bright clouds that return the sun's light so faithfully, turning its face into a polished glow that has comforted countless early risers and late wanderers, while the moon, serene and familiar, performs a similar kindness on a grander disk, reflecting sunlight into silver fields and pale rooftops, proving that even borrowed light can feel deeply intimate, deeply gentle, deeply enough to help someone fall asleep. And then we move outward into the starry night, where Sirius glimmers in its blue-white elegance, the brightest star in Earth's darkness, not the greatest star of all, but one whose combination of luminosity and nearness gives it an almost musical clarity, as if the sky were holding a single cool note for anyone awake enough to hear it. And nearby in spirit, though far away in truth, are other famous lights like Canopus, Arcturus, Vega, and Capella, each with its own quiet personality, each bright for slightly different reasons, some because they are large and luminous, some because they are relatively close, some because they burn hotter, and all of them together reminding us that the sky is not random glitter, but a calm arrangement of stellar lives unfolding on timescales so vast that urgency becomes meaningless. Canopus, for instance, shines with extraordinary power, a star whose true radiance far exceeds the modest calm with which it appears to the eye, while Arcturus glows with a warm amber gentleness, a giant star whose color carries the softness of embers rather than flame. And there is something restful in that, something comforting in knowing that not all brilliance is white or blue or sharp, that some of the universe's brightest companions glow like honey, like late sunlight, like the last warmth of a fire, long after the room has grown still. And if we continue drifting, slowly enough for thought to loosen and breathing to deepen, we encounter stars so luminous that language almost stops trying to measure them. Stars many thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of times brighter than the sun. Vast blue giants and supergiants whose immense energy pours outward in all directions, yet from our peaceful distance, they seem reduced to tender points, which is its own kind of bedtime wisdom, because it reminds us that scale changes feeling, that great intensity far away can arrive as softness, that even overwhelming things become gentle when held in the proper perspective. And this is true, too, of star clusters, those family gatherings of light where many suns share the same dark neighborhood, creating regions of the sky that seem richer and fuller than the spaces around them, as though the universe sometimes prefers company. And among these clusters, the young ones often sparkle with hot, bright stars still in the lush first chapters of their lives, while older clusters glow more quietly, their most massive stars already gone, leaving behind a calmer pattern, a mellowed gathering, a celestial garden that has settled into maturity. And farther still are nebulae lit from within or beside by nearby stars, great clouds of gas that do not simply sit in darkness, but answer light with color, glowing softly in red, rose, blue, and violet shades. And if you imagine them now, not as dramatic storms, but as luminous veils hanging in the cosmic night, then they become easy to rest with, easy to let pass through the mind, like dream fabric. And within such clouds, new stars are often born, which means some of the brightest objects in the universe begin in nurseries of mist and silence, gathering themselves slowly from cold dust and invisible gravity, until one day fusion begins and a new light enters the dark. A small awakening on an immense stage. But tonight, we do not hurry from object to object, because hurry belongs to daylight. And this relaxing story is for the long exhale, for deep sleep, for calming narration that asks nothing from you except a willingness to float. And so we pause beside the thought that every bright thing in the sky is also ancient news. Each beam of light traveling for years or centuries or millennia before reaching the earth, which means the stars above are always slightly remembered, slightly historical, slightly dreamlike, as though the universe itself were telling a slow bedtime story in photons, one that arrives one particle at a time across enormous distances, just to brush the atmosphere, cross a window pane, and meet the closed eyes of someone resting. And perhaps that is why the brightest objects feel so soothing in the night, because they are proofs of continuity, signs that the universe keeps glowing whether we watch or not, whether we understand it fully or not, whether our day was busy or easy or heavy. And in this gentle bedtime journey that can be enough to know that Venus still shines, that Sirius still sings its pale note, that giant stars pour out light in distant silence, that clusters gather, nebulae glow, and the wide dark between them is never empty of meaning, only spacious, only quiet, only kind enough to hold all those lights without strain. And as you drift farther into this sleep story and farther from the weight of the day, you may let those lights become less like facts to remember and more like soft lamps in a corridor of dreams, each one a little dimmer now, a little farther away, a little gentler, until even brightness itself feels calm, and the universe, in all its luminous depth, begins to rock you very slowly towards sleep as our gentle sleep story continues. And as this bedtime story carries you farther from the busy edges of the day, let yourself drift into a quieter reach of the galaxy, where the brightest stars no longer seem like pinpoints alone, but like distant hearths glowing through a vast and peaceful winter night, each one steady in its own way, each one sharing another soft fact to help you fall asleep. And one of the loveliest truths is that many of the brightest stars we notice are giants or supergiants, stars that have grown beyond the ordinary middle years of stellar life and now shine with a kind of grand, unhurried generosity, releasing light across enormous distances while floating in deep silence. Take Rigel, for instance, a blue supergiant whose brilliance is so immense that it radiates far more energy than our sun. Yet from Earth, it appears as a calm jewel in the constellation of Orion, which is a very soothing thing to remember, because it shows how even tremendous power can arrive gently when softened by distance. And nearby, in that same celestial neighborhood, is Betelgeuse, a red supergiant with a softer, warmer tone, its light more ember-like than icy, reminding us that brightness does not have only one color, one mood, or one expression, but can glow cool and white, warm and amber, or deep and ruddy, like different lamps in a quiet house. And perhaps this is part of what makes the night sky such a calming narration in itself, because it is not flat or uniform, but full of subtle differences, stars of many temperatures and stages of life, all shining together without hurry, all keeping their places across spans of time so wide that a human life feels less like a deadline and more like a breath. And as we drift onward in this relaxing story, deeper into the velvet dark, we come to Deneb, another famously luminous star, one whose true brightness is so remarkable that even from a very great distance, it still appears plainly in the sky. And there is comfort in that as well, in knowing that some lights are so enduring and so intrinsically radiant that they can cross astonishing gulfs of space and still arrive as a visible hush, a soft signature, a pale reminder that the universe has room for grandeur without noise. And then there is Polaris, often called the North Star, not the brightest star in the heavens, but an important and calming one, because for generations it has offered steadiness, a point by which travelers found orientation. And in a gentle bedtime like this, that idea matters, the idea that some lights are treasured not simply for intensity, but for reliability, for their quiet ability to help a wandering mind feel less lost. And all around these familiar names are countless other luminous stars whose stories are slow and beautiful, some burning hotter and therefore bluer, some cooler and therefore redder, some varying in brightness over time with a kind of cosmic breathing, swelling and dimming in rhythms too vast for us to notice except through careful watching. And that, too, can become a sleep story fact to rest beside the thought that stars may pulse and change, but they do so patiently over long stretches, with no sudden demand upon you, no urgency at all, only the soft reminder that change itself can be graceful. There are also pairs and families of stars, binary systems, and multiple star arrangements, where two or more suns move around one another in elegant gravitational dances, sharing a common balance. And these systems can be among the brighter sights in the sky because companionship, in the cosmos as in life, sometimes creates a richer radiance than solitude alone. And if you imagine them now, not as technical diagrams, but as lanterns turning slowly around each other in a dark and quiet hall, then their motion becomes almost lullaby-like, repetitive in the most peaceful sense, dependable and slow. Farther out still, entire star clouds and associations shine with a diffuse brightness, regions where young, luminous stars gather in loose company, bathing nearby gas in pale light. And though the scale is enormous, the feeling can remain intimate, because the mind at night does not need exact measurements as much as it needs soft shapes, calm images, and the sense that the universe is wide enough to hold everything gently, including your thoughts as they grow less sharp, less busy, less attached to the day behind you. And if you notice your breathing now, it may already be slower, because this nighttime story is meant to move like deep water. And these facts about the brightest objects in the universe are not here to excite you, but to soothe you, to become little points of floating attention that keep the mind from gripping anything too tightly, so that Rigel can simply glow. Betelgeuse can simply warm the darkness with its reddish hue. Deneb can simply remain a far and faithful blaze. Polaris can simply stand watch in stillness. And all the unnamed bright stars can gather into a broad, silent canopy above your resting imagination. And there is one more soft idea to carry with you as this chapter eases toward its close, which is that every bright star you could ever see is engaged in a long conversation with time, sending out light that travels onward without haste, crossing emptiness not as loneliness, but as connection, until at last some tiny portion of it reaches a world like ours and becomes part of a human moment. Perhaps this very moment, perhaps this deep sleep passage where science turns tender and distance turns kind. And as you continue to drift in this gentle bedtime journey, you do not need to hold each name or detail, because they can settle around you like faint lantern glow through curtains, leaving only the softest impression of radiance, of warmth, of silent celestial company, until the great stars themselves seem to recede into the background of a dream, and only the calm remains, broad and dark, and beautifully lit from within, as this gentle bedtime story carries you farther into the calm architecture of the cosmos. Let yourself arrive in a quieter province of light, a place where brightness does not come from a single radiant star alone, but from vast clouds of gas and dust touched by starlight, softened by distance, and spread across the darkness like luminous silk. For among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is the simple truth that some of the loveliest glowing regions in space are nebulae, immense drifting veils where stars are born, where old light is scattered, and where the universe seems to breathe in colors too soft to disturb sleep. And if you imagine them now, not as dramatic storms, but as tranquil celestial curtains suspended in weightlessness, then it becomes very easy to rest beside them, very easy to let the mind loosen its grasp and float. Some nebulae shine because stars within them or near them pour energy into the surrounding gas, causing that gas to glow in gentle shades of rose, crimson, violet, or pale blue. And others shine by reflection, borrowing light the way the moon borrows from the sun, taking brilliance from a nearby star and turning it into a cool, misty radiance, so that even here, in the quiet depths of this sleep story, we are reminded once more that borrowed light can be beautiful, that reflection can be enough, that not every bright thing must burn fiercely in order to offer comfort. And among these cosmic nurseries are places where new stars are gathering slowly out of cold clouds, where gravity draws matter inward over immense spans of time, so patiently that the process feels almost like a lullaby written in silence, a slow collecting, a long folding inward, until at last the pressure deep in a forming star becomes great enough for fusion to begin, and then one more light joins the universe. One more warm lantern appears in the dark. One more point of radiance is added to the endless night. Perhaps that is one of the calmest facts of all, that brightness can begin in stillness, that some of the most luminous objects first exist as quiet dust adrift in shadow, as if the universe itself understands that light is most meaningful when it rises gently from darkness rather than trying to conquer it. And if we drift a little farther through this relaxing story, deeper into the soft architecture of the galaxy, we come upon a mission Nebulae, those glowing clouds whose atoms have been energized by nearby hot stars, and their light, though born of energetic processes, reaches us as something dreamlike and delicate, stretched across such immense distances that intensity becomes tenderness, brilliance becomes hush, and the vast mechanics of astrophysics are translated into something as soothing as colored fog under moonlight. There are also planetary nebulae, whose name sounds more solid than they truly are, for they are not planets at all, but shells of gas cast off by aging stars, expanding outward in elegant patterns, often round or layered or faintly petaled, like flowers made of fading light. And there is a deeply peaceful thought hidden there, that even the later chapters of a star's life may produce beauty, that endings in the universe are not always abrupt or harsh, but can be luminous, spacious, and artful. And in dark nebulae, where dense dust blocks the stars behind, there is another kind of brightness waiting quietly, not seen directly, but implied by contrast, because the surrounding stellar fields shine all the more softly around those shadowed shapes, making darkness itself part of the design, part of the visual music of the heavens. And perhaps that is good to remember tonight as your own thoughts grow dimmer, because rest is not the absence of something valuable, but part of the rhythm that allows light to feel gentle, just as silence allows a lullaby to feel complete. Whole regions of our galaxy are made beautiful by these luminous clouds, where clusters of young stars emerge together like a family of candles newly lit. And these stars, especially the hottest among them, can be so bright that they transform their surroundings, sculpting nearby gas into arcs and pillars and soft, glowing walls. Though from our peaceful distance, they look less like structures and more like brushed textures in a cosmic painting, blended forms without hard edges, perfect for a nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep. And as we continue this calming narration, you may notice that the brighter objects of the universe no longer seem separate from one another, because stars, nebulae, clusters, and galaxies all begin to feel connected, as though brightness itself were a language spoken in many accents, sometimes by a single blue-white star, sometimes by a red giant glowing warmly, sometimes by a whole cloud illuminated from within. And the mind, growing quieter now, no longer needs to sort them too sharply, because what matters most in this gentle bedtime hour is not classification, but feeling, not memorizing, but drifting, not precision, but peace. So imagine now that you are floating very slowly through one of these stellar nurseries, not moving with any rush, only gliding as if carried by the softest current. And around you, the glowing mist opens in folds and layers, some brighter, some fainter, some nearly transparent, while newborn stars shimmer through the haze like distant lamps behind fine curtains. And everything is untroubled, everything suspended, everything so patient that time itself seems to soften and widen until minutes no longer matter, and only the sensation remains, the sensation of being held inside a universe where even the brightest things are quiet from far away, where new stars awaken without noise, where old stars leave glowing shells behind them, where reflected light and emitted light mingle in tender clouds, and where the darkness between all things is not empty or cold, but velvety, spacious, and kind. And as this sleep story carries you onward, deeper toward rest, those luminous nebulae may begin to blur at the edges, melting into the inner colors of dreams until the starry nurseries themselves feel less like places you are observing, and more like soft rooms you are passing through on your way to deep sleep. Each one dimmer now, calmer now, more distant now, and wonderfully serene now, as this sleep story carries you farther from the bright nurseries of newborn stars and deeper into the calm beyond familiar clouds of glowing gas. Let yourself drift into a wider and softer view where whole galaxies begin to appear not as crowded storms of detail, but as slow rivers of starlight turning in the dark. And among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is the quiet truth that some of the greatest brightness does not come from one star alone, or even from one glowing cloud, but from the combined light of billions upon billions of stars gathered together in graceful forms so large that the mind need not measure them, only rest beside them, because a galaxy, when seen from a peaceful distance, becomes less like a structure to analyze and more like a luminous island adrift on a cosmic sea. And here in this gentle bedtime story, where every thought is invited to soften, you may imagine the nearest great galaxies as silent lantern cities of light, some arranged in elegant spirals, whose arms curve outward like the brushstrokes of a patient painter, others more rounded and smooth, glowing with the mellow radiance of older stars. And there is something deeply soothing in knowing that the universe has made not just stars and nebulae, but entire gatherings of light, vast communities that turn so slowly through the darkness that even millions of years can seem like a single, unhurried breath. Our own Milky Way, though we live inside it and can never see it fully from within, is itself one of these calm star cities, a great spiral home of countless suns, dust lanes, clusters, and glowing regions. And when you look at the pale band of it across a truly dark sky, you are really seeing the soft, blended shine of many distant stars together, which means that one of the loveliest lights visible to the human eye is not one lamp, but a multitude, not one flame, but a long, luminous chorus. And beyond our own galaxy lie others, each with its own personality. And some of the brightest among them shine with particular grace because they are close enough, large enough, or rich enough in stars to offer their light across enormous space, so that from far away they appear as faint but steady clouds, not empty at all, but richly filled with suns. And there is comfort in that image, comfort in the idea that what looks simple from afar may contain unimaginable abundance within. Much as a quiet night can hold so many layered feelings and still remain peaceful, some galaxies are especially bright because stars are being formed there in generous numbers, filling them with hot blue-white brilliance, while others glow more softly with the golden hush of older stellar populations. And in this way, even galaxies seem to age with dignity, changing not with panic or noise, but through long natural rhythms, as if the whole universe understands how to mature without hurry. And if we continue drifting through this relaxing story, allowing the mind to grow heavier and more dreamlike, we begin to notice that galaxies are not scattered entirely alone, but often gather in clusters and groups, vast families of galaxies held together by gravity. And the beauty of that fact is how quietly it enlarges the scene, because what seemed like one shining island may itself belong to a still wider archipelago, a greater pattern of luminous company, extending into distances so large that ordinary thought simply lets go and floats. There are giant elliptical galaxies whose light feels especially serene, broad and smooth, and amber with age, built from the glow of old stars collected over immense time. And there are spiral galaxies with bright central bulges and winding arms where younger stars scatter their bluish brilliance along curling paths. And each form offers its own mood, one like a soft golden lantern under silk, another like a pinwheel, turning so slowly that its motion becomes a kind of stillness. Even the spaces between galaxies are not lonely in the way the waking mind sometimes fears, because they are part of the same vast composition, part of the dark velvet that allows brightness to feel gentle rather than overwhelming. And perhaps this is one of the reasons the universe can be such a calming narration for deep sleep, because it never fills every space at once, never shouts light into every corner, but balances glow with shadow, brilliance with room to rest, so that the eye and the imagination are never crowded. And somewhere in these enormous galactic gatherings, the brightest members shine like slow beacons, their combined starlight traveling for unimaginable spans before arriving as a faint softness in the minds of creatures lying quietly on distant worlds. Which means that even now, as you sink more deeply into this nighttime story, you are joined to those far galaxies by light itself, by photons that have crossed the dark with endless patience, carrying no urgency, only presence. And so tonight, the bright objects of the universe are no longer only stars or nebulae, but whole realms of radiance, immense and tranquil, where billions of suns blend into one silken glow, where spiral arms curl in silence, where ancient elliptical galaxies rest like golden embers of deep time, and where clusters of galaxies gather, as though even on the largest scales, the cosmos still prefers quiet companionship. And as these images pass through your thoughts, they need not remain sharp, because sleep does not ask for sharpness, only softness, only the slow dissolving of edges. So let the galaxies blur gently now into wide swaths of light. Let their spirals become smooth ribbons. Let their bright centers become small, warm pearls floating in dark water. And let the vastness around them cradle you rather than challenge you, until all those distant rivers of starlight seem to flow together into one calm impression, one soothing and spacious glow. And you, listening here in the dark, may simply drift beside it, lighter than thought, quieter than breath, and nearer with every moment to deep and dream-filled sleep, as this sleep story carries you onward, farther from the quiet rivers of starlight that turned through the last chapter. Let yourself drift into an even deeper stillness where the brightest objects in the universe begin to glow, not only as stars and galaxies, but as the luminous hearts of very ancient realms. And here, in this gentle bedtime story, we arrive at one of the most astonishing and yet strangely calming facts of all. Some of the brightest, steady lights ever observed are quasars, distant beacons shining from the centers of young galaxies, so far away that their light has spent enormous stretches of time traveling through the dark just to reach a resting mind on Earth. And though their true nature is powerful, tonight we meet them only as soft points of far-off brilliance, like candles seen across a sleeping sea, too distant to disturb, too ancient to hurry, simply glowing where the early universe once gathered itself into grand and luminous forms. And perhaps what makes them so soothing in a nighttime story is not their intensity alone, but the tenderness of distance, because space has a way of turning even the most immense energies into quiet impressions, so that what might be wild nearby becomes serene from afar. And a quasar, viewed across billions of light years, is no longer something to fear or strain to understand, but a patient lighthouse from deep time, sending its old silver message onward without asking anything from you except that you listen and soften and let your thoughts become light enough to float. At the center of many galaxies, there rests a supermassive black hole. And though those words might sound severe in daylight, here in the calm of this relaxing story, we hold them differently, as quiet cosmic centers, places around which stars orbit and time unfolds. And when matter drifts inward towards such a center, it can form a shining disk, a broad whirl of light so radiant that the core of the galaxy may outshine the billions of stars around it, which means one of the brightest objects in the universe may come from a region smaller than the galaxy it belongs to. And there is something beautifully paradoxical in that, something restful, the idea that a small center can carry great light, that the heart of something can glow more strongly than its edges. And as you drift deeper into this calming narration, imagine these galactic hearts not as violent engines, but as distant lanterns surrounded by velvet space, their brilliance softened by unimaginable remoteness, their light stretched by travel, their presence made gentle by the very depth of the universe. And notice how the mind no longer needs to separate fact from dream too sharply, because the scientific truth itself is already dreamlike enough, already full of soft immensities and long patient distances, and brightness so old it feels almost like memory. Some quasars are visible from such extraordinary ranges that they help astronomers glimpse the early chapters of cosmic history. And this, too, is one of the most relaxing facts to carry into deep sleep. That light can be a form of remembering that to look far away is also to look gently backward, and that the brightest objects in the universe often arrive as ancient visitors carrying news from eras long before our world had become what it is now. And around these bright galactic centers, there may be whole cities of stars, swirling in spiral arms or resting in rounder, older shapes, all of them gathered into balance around their hidden center. And the more you rest with this image, the more it begins to resemble something simple and familiar, like a quiet house built around a warm lamp in the middle room, each corridor dim and calm, each window silvered by night, each distant chamber part of the same peaceful structure. And there are active galaxies whose cores shine with special brilliance, even when the rest of the galaxy appears soft and diffuse. And there are radio galaxies, Seyfert galaxies, and other luminous kinds of cosmic homes, each one a variation on the same tender theme, that the universe knows many ways to glow, many ways to gather light, many ways to let brightness bloom from hidden centers rather than obvious surfaces. And in this bedtime story, that variety is not something to keep you awake, but something to ease the mind away from its narrow loops, giving it wider halls to wander, until those halls themselves begin to fade into dream. Now imagine, as you continue to fall asleep, that you are passing slowly through a region where these distant galactic hearts hang like pearls suspended in the dark, each surrounded by a faint haze of starlight, each one so remote that no movement can be seen, only presence, only the quiet assurance that immense things may remain perfectly still from the right distance. And perhaps that is the lesson the universe offers again and again in this gentle bedtime hour. That perspective creates peace, that scale creates softness, that the farther we drift from urgency, the more even brightness becomes restful. So let the quasars dim now into a calmer glow in the mind. Let their ancient light lengthen into silver threads. Let the galaxies around them become broad, dark petals around a hidden lamp. And let all of it move more slowly, more faintly, more gently, until the brightest beacons in the universe are no longer dazzling at all, but hushed and far away, part of a cosmic lullaby made of old light and patient darkness. And you, held within this relaxing story, may simply continue drifting past them in silence, quieter than before, heavier in the best way, and closer now to that deep sleep where even the oldest lights soften into dreams. As this sleep story carries you farther into the calm reaches of the universe, let yourself drift into a quieter understanding of brightness, because not every luminous object is brightest at the beginning of its life, and some of the most beautiful lights in the cosmos appear in the long, graceful afterglow that follows change. And so tonight, in this bedtime story, we move gently among the tender remnants of stars, among glowing shells, fading veils, and steady pulses of light that remain after a star has transformed. And one of the most relaxing facts of all is that the universe does not simply lose light when a star changes form, but often rearranges it, softens it, and lets it linger in new patterns across the dark. Some stars, after long ages of shining, release their outer layers into space, creating expanding clouds of gas that glow with delicate color and shape. And from a peaceful distance, these remnants resemble translucent lanterns or drifting blossoms, pale circles and soft ovals suspended in the velvet dark, each one reminding us that endings in the cosmos can be radiant rather than abrupt, spacious rather than severe. And in this relaxing story that matters because it lets the mind rest beside the thought that even great transitions may unfold with a kind of quiet elegance, and as we glide onward, slowly enough for thought itself to blur at the edges, we find that some of these stellar remains shine because nearby light excites the gas, while others glow because hot central remnants still illuminate the shell from within. And this makes them feel almost like paper lanterns floating in a night garden, lit gently from the center, their edges feathered, their brightness softened by distance and time. And there is something especially soothing in imagining the universe as a place where light can persist in delicate layers, where a star may leave behind not silence alone, but a final luminous sigh. And then there are white dwarfs, small and dense stellar embers, no longer burning in the same way as before, yet still warm, still radiant, still slowly cooling over immense spans of time. And perhaps they are among the most comforting cosmic objects of all, because they show that even after a great life of shining, there can be a long and peaceful chapter of gentle fading, not a sudden disappearance, but a patient release of stored warmth into the surrounding dark. In this nighttime story, you do not need to hold the technical details too tightly, only the feeling of it, the image of an ember that remains bright long after the fire has quieted, and the calm truth that the universe is full of such embers, small ancient lights resting in silence. And if we continue a little farther, we encounter pulsars, which may sound brisk in name, but from here they feel almost musical, because their light can arrive in measured intervals, repeating with astonishing steadiness, like a distant lighthouse beam turning across a still sea, or like the soft tick of an invisible clock heard from another room. And one of the most wonderful facts about them is their reliability, their patient rhythm, their ability to turn motion into calm repetition, which is exactly the kind of pattern a weary mind can rest beside as it begins to fall asleep. And beyond them lie supernova remnants, the widening traces of stars that once changed dramatically and have now settled into broad glowing structures, sometimes woven like filaments, sometimes spread like luminous smoke. And though their origin belongs to powerful transformation, what we meet tonight is only the hush that remains, the gentle architecture of light drifting outward through the dark, so softened by scale and distance that it becomes dreamlike, painterly, almost weightless. And as you imagine those faint glowing threads stretching slowly across space, you may notice how naturally your breathing follows them, lengthening, loosening, becoming slower and deeper with each passing sentence. In this gentle bedtime passage, there is another calming truth hidden here, too, which is that the materials released by old stars do not vanish into emptiness, but enrich the galaxy, becoming part of future clouds, future stars, future planets, future stones, future oceans, perhaps even future living beings, which means the brightest objects in the universe are not isolated performers, but participants in a quiet cycle of giving. And that thought can be very peaceful at night. The thought that the cosmos is less about loss than transformation, less about endings than passing light from one form to another. And so, in this calming narration for deep sleep, the afterglow of stars becomes a kind of lullaby, a reminder that brightness need not be sharp to matter, that what lingers may be just as lovely as what first appears, and that the dark itself is not opposed to light, but holds it gently, gives it room, lets it spread into veils and rings and pulses and embers. Imagine now that you are floating through a vast and silent gallery, where these remnants hang one after another, each softly illuminated, each fading at its own unhurried pace, some round and pearly, some filamented and airy, some no more than a tiny white spark cooling in stillness, and all of them offering the same quiet reassurance that the universe moves slowly, that even change can be serene, that light can continue in softened forms long after its first brilliance has passed. And as this sleep story continues to carry you deeper, deeper beyond thought and nearer to dream, let those shells of light blur gently. Let the pulses become farther apart. Let the white dwarf embers dim into warm pinpoints, and let the whole field of afterglow recede into a peaceful haze, until nothing remains but the feeling of drifting among old lights that have already done all their shining, and now rest calmly and beautifully in the dark. And you, listening here in the softness of night, may rest with them, may follow their quiet example, may release the day in the same gentle way, and sink a little farther now toward deep sleep. And now, as this sleep story carries you even deeper into stillness, beyond the soft afterglow of transformed stars, and into a wider, calmer architecture of light, let yourself arrive in the presence of clusters, those gentle gatherings where brightness becomes communal, where many stars, or even many galaxies, rest together in slow companionship. And one of the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is that light often prefers company, often gathers rather than stands alone, so that what seems at first like a single misty glow may actually be countless luminous lives sharing the same deep and quiet space. And here, in this bedtime story designed for heavy eyelids and unhurried breathing, we begin with globular clusters, ancient spherical gatherings of stars that hover around galaxies like soft lantern bouquets, each one containing hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of stars packed into a graceful, rounded form. And there is something profoundly soothing in imagining them, not as crowded or noisy places, but as hushed celestial orchards where old stars burn with mellow steadiness, and the whole cluster shines like a pearl, suspended in velvet darkness. These are among the oldest star groupings in the cosmos, and so they carry a particular kind of calm, a brightness shaped not by youth and urgency, but by age and endurance, by time so deep that the cluster itself begins to feel less like an object and more like a memory the universe has kept safe for billions of years. And that can be a lovely thing to rest beside tonight, the thought that some lights have remained faithful for spans so vast that even our longest worries become very small within them. And as we drift past these rounded gatherings in this relaxing story, you may picture their centers glowing more thickly, their outer stars thinning into softer halos, each cluster like a quiet snow globe of starlight, gently held, gently turning. And though the stars within them move under gravity's patient guidance, from here everything seems still, perfectly composed, as if time itself has slowed to match your breathing. And beyond globular clusters, there are open clusters, looser and younger families of stars, often bright with youthful radiance, where the members were born from the same cloud and still travel together through the galaxy. And this too is a comforting fact, that stars may have siblings, that the universe does not always form its lights in isolation, but sometimes in tender groups. And these younger clusters can feel like handfuls of frost-bright diamonds scattered on dark silk, light and airy, compared with the denser ancient globular swarms, yet equally gentle in the imagination of someone preparing to fall asleep. And if we widen the lens of this gentle bedtime journey even more, the cosmos offers still greater gatherings, not only clusters of stars, but clusters of galaxies, immense assemblies in which whole galaxies keep each other company across vast reaches of space. And one of the softest scientific wonders is that these clusters can shine not just through the light of their many members, but through a faint glow that lingers between them, called intracluster light, a delicate wash made of stars no longer bound to any single galaxy, but drifting through the cluster itself like free-floating embers. And there is something deeply peaceful in that image, the idea that even between the great islands of light, there can be a gentle luminosity, a pale radiance in the spaces between, as though the universe is unwilling to let companionship end too sharply. Some galaxy clusters are among the most luminous large-scale structures of all, glowing in many kinds of light, from the visible shimmer of stars to the softer, hidden emissions of hot gas. Yet from our far and tranquil perspective, they can be imagined simply as grand archipelagos in a cosmic ocean, whole realms of brightness gathered into patient fellowship, with no urgency in their turning, no haste in their arrangement, only the vast, slow truth that gravity, over immense time, draws even great lights toward one another. And if you imagine yourself floating now between these enormous clusters, not lost, but held, not cold, but cradled by the spacious dark, you may notice how soothing it is that the universe repeats its patterns at different scales, stars gathering into clusters, clusters orbiting galaxies, galaxies gathering into larger clusters, as though light itself enjoys forming communities, enjoys nesting within wider circles. And this repeating softness can become part of the calming narration tonight, part of the lullaby hidden inside astronomy, because repetition is restful, and patterns that recur across space can make the mind feel safe enough to loosen its grip. There are even moments when the gravity of massive clusters bends light from more distant galaxies behind them, subtly magnifying and curving it, a phenomenon so elegant that it feels almost dreamlike, as if the universe were turning itself into a lens, not to startle, but to reveal. And even this can be held gently here, not as something technical or sharp, but as one more example of the cosmos behaving with quiet grace, allowing brightness to be shaped, stretched, and softened on its long journey through the dark. And And so as this nighttime story deepens, and as each sentence moves more slowly than the last, let the clusters become your companions in drowsiness. Let the globular clusters glow like antique pearls. Let the open clusters shimmer like loose handfuls of cool light. Let the galaxy clusters gather at the far edges of thought like cities seen from a great calm height. And let all of them remind you that the brightest objects in the universe are often most beautiful when they are together, when their light is shared, when their presence becomes a field rather than a point, a hush rather than a flash. And now, as you settle even closer to deep sleep, let those clustered lights drift farther apart in your mind until they become only a soft impression of togetherness in the dark, a broad and tender glow made of many quiet things resting near one another. And with them, you may rest too, gently gathered, gently dimming, gently carried onward into dream. Now, as this gentle sleep story carries you farther still, beyond the gathered hush of clusters, and into a more delicate and dreamlike reach of the cosmos, let yourself drift into one of the softest wonders in all of astronomy, the quiet truth that light does not always travel in perfectly straight simplicity, but sometimes passes through the presence of great mass and is gently bent, folded, or magnified so that some of the brightest distant objects in the universe appear to us with the tender help of gravity itself. And in this bedtime story, that fact can feel less like physics and more like kindness, as though the universe occasionally lifts a far lantern closer to the eyes of those who are watching, not with effort or noise, but with a calm and patient curve in space. And so tonight, we drift beside the luminous phenomenon of gravitational lensing, where the light of a remote galaxy or quasar passes near a massive cluster of galaxies on its way to us, and the great weight of that cluster shapes the path of the light, sometimes stretching it into arcs, sometimes brightening it, sometimes even forming rings or multiple mirrored images, all of it so elegant and still that it feels like watching moonlight bend across quiet water. And one of the most relaxing facts about this is that the lens itself does not shine by trying, but by simply existing, by holding its place in the vast dark, while light from behind it glides past and is softly redirected. And if you imagine that now, a distant galaxy glowing faintly behind a massive cluster, its light curving around intervening gravity until it reaches us brighter than it otherwise might have been, then the whole universe begins to feel like a series of silken veils layered one behind another, each one altering the next with infinite gentleness. And perhaps that is why this subject belongs so well in a calming narration for deep sleep, because it tells us that even across unimaginable distances, the cosmos behaves with grace, with subtlety, with motions so smooth they seem almost like thought drifting toward dream. Some of the farthest galaxies ever studied become visible in part because gravity magnifies them. And this means that the brightest objects are not always merely the ones that produce the most light, but also those whose light is helped along its way, lovingly stretched and lifted by the structure of the universe itself. And there is something deeply comforting in that. The idea that brightness can be assisted, that faraway things may be made more visible by the presence of other great and silent things between them and us. And as we continue in this nighttime story, you may picture these lensed galaxies as soft crescents, luminous threads, or complete rings of pale fire suspended in the dark, not burning fiercely, only glowing like fine jewelry left under starlight, while behind them still more distant galaxies wait in quiet layers, each one sending its own patient light forward through the velvet depth of time. And perhaps you can feel, as your breathing grows slower, how naturally this folded light belongs beside sleep, because sleep itself is a kind of soft bending, a gradual curving away from the sharp, straight lines of waking thought. And just as gravity turns a beam of light into an arc, rest turns a busy mind into something rounder, quieter, more fluid, more open to dim and beautiful things that do not need to be solved. And farther out still are ancient galaxies whose light began its journey when the universe itself was younger. And though they may be intrinsically brilliant with young stars and active galactic hearts, by the time their glow arrives to us, it has become hushed by distance, reddened by expansion, softened by age. And that is one of the most peaceful cosmic truths of all, that even the brightest lights can mellow over time, can travel so far that they shed every trace of urgency and reach us only as a faint and tender memory of radiance. There are also galaxy clusters that act like vast transparent windows with curved edges, allowing astronomers to glimpse objects that would otherwise remain too dim and far away. And in this way, the universe reveals some of its most distant brilliance through layers, through intermediaries, through gentle distortions that are more beautiful for not being direct. And perhaps the mind on the edge of sleep understands this better than the waking mind does, because dreams also reveal things indirectly through softened shapes and symbolic light, through reflections and echoes rather than sharp declarations. So imagine now that you are floating before an immense dark tapestry threaded with arcs of silver, each arc the bent light of a galaxy so distant that its stars have been shining toward you for ages, beyond easy imagining, while nearer clusters rest like quiet glass mountains in the foreground, invisible almost, except for the way they shape the scene. And everything is slow, everything suspended, everything moving with such patience that motion itself disappears into stillness. And as this relaxing story deepens, let those arcs of light become smoother and fainter. Let the rings soften into halos. Let the far galaxies blur into pale brushstrokes behind the lensing clusters, until all the folded brightness of the universe begins to resemble a calm pattern on the inside of closed eyelids. Something seen and not seen, something scientific and dreamlike at once. And you no longer need to hold the names or mechanisms, only the feeling that the cosmos is full of quiet assistance, full of gentle shaping, full of light that finds its way through enormous darkness by curving softly rather than rushing straight ahead. And with that thought, you may drift farther inward now, lighter and heavier at once, while the bent and magnified lanterns of remote galaxies fade into the soft, protective dark, carrying you ever more peacefully toward deep sleep, as this sleep story carries you farther than ordinary distance, farther than clusters and folded light, and the quiet lanterns of ancient galaxies. Let yourself drift toward one of the softest and most profound facts in all the universe. The idea that even the oldest light still lingers, that brightness does not always arrive as a single star or a shining quasar or a glowing cloud, but sometimes as a vast and gentle background, a whisper of radiance spread across everything. And tonight, in this bedtime story, we glide into that immense stillness with no effort at all, as though the dark itself were laying a silver blanket over the mind. For among the most relaxing scientific wonders is the truth that the universe has a kind of afterglow, a faint, ancient light that remains from its early history, stretched and softened by time, until it no longer dazzles, but rests everywhere like the hush before dawn. And if you imagine that now, not as something technical or sharp, but as the palest warmth behind the velvet dark, then it becomes easy to let your thoughts float inside it, easy to feel that you are being carried not through emptiness, but through a calm ocean that remembers its first light. And perhaps that is one of the gentlest facts of all, that the cosmos, even at its most immense, still keeps a memory of brightness, still holds the faded trace of beginnings. And in this relaxing story for deep sleep, that memory is not loud or demanding, but delicate, like the last warmth in a room long after the lamp has been turned low. By now, the brighter objects we have passed in this nighttime story, the stars, the nebulae, the glowing clusters, the luminous hearts of galaxies, have all begun to feel less like separate destinations and more like notes in one long, slow lullaby. And here at the silver shore of the earliest light, they seem to gather behind you in softened layers, as if the whole universe has been guiding you outward, only so that it may guide you inward too, toward a quieter and gentler stillness than before. Imagine yourself floating in a calm region where there are no sharp edges, no sudden movements, no need to focus on any one object, because the light here is broad and even and tender. A background glow so subtle that it feels almost like the inside of a dream. And this can be a wonderfully soothing thing to rest beside, because the waking mind often wants bright points and clear outlines, while the sleepy mind welcomes softness, welcomes what cannot quite be grasped, welcomes a field of calm instead of a single demand for attention. And so, as your breathing grows slower, let this ancient glow become the gentlest companion of all, not ahead of you or behind you, but all around, a reminder that the universe is not only a place of spectacular brightness, but also of lingering radiance, of light that has traveled so long and become so soft that it now feels almost like silence made visible. There are peaceful truths hidden in that image, truths that belong beautifully in a gentle bedtime hour, because it means that time can soften anything, distance can quiet anything, and what once may have been too immense for easy imagining can, over eons, become a calm presence that simply surrounds and holds. In that way, the oldest light in the universe is very much like rest itself, because rest does not erase the day, but softens it, does not argue with thought, but lets thought grow wider and dimmer, until it no longer presses so closely against the mind. And this chapter of our calming narration asks nothing more of you than that same softening, that same release into a wider peace. And as we drift here, suspended in the hush beyond familiar stars, you may picture the cosmos as a great house gone quiet after a long evening. Each bright room now dimmed, each corridor silvered with the last gentle glow, each distant window holding only the faintest trace of light. And through this immense and sleeping house, you move without footsteps, without effort, carried by stillness itself. The most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe now begin to merge into one tender understanding. That brightness is not only brilliance, but endurance. Not only intensity, but patience. Not only the blazing moment, but the long, soft afterward. And there is deep comfort in that, because it means the universe knows how to linger gently, knows how to remain present without overwhelming, knows how to fade without vanishing. So let the old glow around you become even softer now, like pale mist over dark water, like moonlight diffused through thin curtains, like a memory of light rather than light itself. And let every thought that still clings to the edges of wakefulness loosen a little more, because nothing here needs to be followed to the end. Nothing here needs to be held. This sleep story can simply become a current beneath you. This bedtime story can become a cradle of distance and silence. This relaxing story can carry you the rest of the way toward deep sleep, while the earliest radiance in the universe watches over nothing in particular and everything at once. And if the stars now seem far away, that is all right. And if the galaxies have blurred into soft suggestions, that is all right too, because you have come to a place where brightness itself has grown quiet, where even the oldest light has learned to whisper. And here, on this silver shore at the edge of thought, you may drift without measure, without effort, without any need to stay awake, while the universe rests around you in one vast and tender glow. And the night, kind and endless, gently closes as this sleep story continues through the silver hush of the universe. And as your thoughts grow softer and more distant from the busy weight of the day, let yourself drift toward another peaceful kind of brightness, not the sharp brightness of a single nearby star, nor the dramatic glow of a brilliant galactic heart, but the broad, mellow radiance of the largest quiet galaxies, those immense and ancient homes of starlight that seem to rest in space like golden lanterns wrapped in layers of velvet shadow. And among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is that some of the grandest galaxies do not shine with youthful urgency at all, but with the calm accumulation of countless older stars, each one adding its gentle note to a luminous chorus that has been building for ages beyond easy imagining. These giant elliptical galaxies, often found near the centers of galaxy clusters, can grow to extraordinary size. Their light spread across vast, smooth halos, and from a peaceful distance, they appear almost like glowing islands of amber mist, not hurried, not restless, but quietly present, as if they have long ago learned the art of shining without strain. And there is something especially soothing in that image tonight, because it offers brightness without intensity, magnitude without noise, and presence without demand. In this bedtime story, where every sentence is meant to carry you more gently toward deep sleep, You may imagine one of these great galaxies now, hanging before you in the dark, like a soft oval lamp, its outer edges feathered and diffuse, its center a little warmer and fuller, and throughout it, an uncountable multitude of stars glow together so seamlessly that no single light needs to stand apart, which is a comforting thought in itself, the thought that radiance can be shared so completely that it becomes one tranquil field rather than many separate flames. And some of the brightest among these galaxies are what astronomers sometimes regard as central giants, enormous galaxies that sit near the quiet middle of their clusters, as if the cluster had slowly gathered around them over long ages, and their size is partly the result of patient cosmic history, of mergers so gradual on human scales that they feel less like collisions and more like the slow joining of drifting clouds. And even that can be restful here, because in this relaxing story, we meet no suddenness, only the softened outcome, the final hush of many ancient gatherings blended into one broad gold glow. Around these giant galaxies, there may stretch very faint halos of stars, vast envelopes of dim light, extending farther than the brighter core suggests. And one of the loveliest facts to carry into sleep is that some of the universe's largest bright objects are also edged with near-invisible softness, as though the cosmos itself prefers blurred margins, prefers gentle transitions, prefers to let light fade gradually into dark rather than stop abruptly. And perhaps that is why such galaxies feel so suited to a nighttime story, because sleep also arrives by softening the edges, by dimming the boundary between one thought and the next, until even the mind develops a halo. There are stars within these giant galaxies that are older than many younger regions elsewhere in the cosmos, stars that have been shining for astonishing stretches of time with the mellow steadiness of age, and together they lend these galaxies a warmer, more golden tone than the blue-white blaze of youthful star-forming systems, so that here brightness becomes autumnal rather than spring-like, ember-like rather than flame-like. And if you picture that now, the universe holding vast collections of old warm light, then the dark around you may begin to feel less empty and more like a quiet room lit by distant hearths. Some central galaxies are so extensive that their light mingles gently with the intracluster glow around them, making it difficult to say exactly where the galaxy ends and the wider luminous environment begins. And that too is a peaceful fact, because it reminds us that the brightest things in the universe do not always have hard borders, that they may dissolve into their surroundings with grace, participating in a larger softness, just as your own awareness may now be dissolving into the calm rhythm of this gentle bedtime narration. And as we drift past these immense golden realms, we might think of how many stars have lived and changed within them, how many quiet stellar lives have contributed to this broad radiance. And yet from here, all of that history arrives as a simple impression, a slow oval of light resting in silence, which is perhaps one of the deepest comforts of distance. That complexity can become serenity, that countless motions can become stillness, that immense stories can be gathered into one calm glow. So in this sleep story, as you continue to fall asleep, Let these vast galaxies become your companions for a while. Let them hang in the background of the mind, like warm lamps at the end of long corridors. Let their halos stretch softly into the surrounding dark. Let their ancient stars blend into one continuous hush of gold. And let the fact of their age and scale soothe you rather than challenge you. Because nothing here needs to be counted, nothing here needs to be solved, nothing here needs to remain sharp. This is a gentle bedtime journey, and these largest quiet galaxies are perfect for such a journey because they show that some of the greatest brightness in the universe is not the brightness of sudden brilliance, but of patient gathering, of long endurance, of light layered upon light, until the whole becomes smooth, mellow, and deeply restful. And as the chapter draws its soft curtain around you, let those golden galaxies recede a little farther now, becoming broader, dimmer, and more dreamlike, until they are no longer objects at all, but a tender golden presence in the distance, floating at the edge of sleep, where all bright things become quiet, and the quiet itself becomes enough as this gentle sleep story continues. And as the last edges of waking thought grow softer and less distinct, let yourself drift toward another peaceful kind of brightness, the brightness of the hottest stars, those blue-white suns whose light begins in tremendous heat, yet reaches us across such immense distances that it feels cool, delicate, and serene. And among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is that some of the stars that appear most silvery and calm to the eye are in truth among the hottest and most luminous of all, which means that distance can turn intensity into tenderness, can soften even the most radiant source into something like a quiet lamp at the far end of a sleeping hall. And here, in this bedtime story made for deep sleep and calming narration, that idea is a lovely one to rest beside, because it reminds us that the universe is full of transformations, not only in matter and time, but in feeling, where what is fierce at its source can become gentle in its arrival. And so the blue stars we meet tonight are not sharp or harsh, but smooth and crystalline, like pale flames seen through frosted glass. Many of the brightest stars in the night belong to this family of hot, luminous objects, stars whose surfaces shine at temperatures far greater than our sun's, pouring out vast amounts of energy while they are still young in cosmic terms. And yet, from our safe and dreamlike distance, they appear almost weightless, mere points of cool brilliance sewn into the velvet dark. Each one a tiny icy blossom blooming very far away. Some live fast by stellar standards, spending their fuel more quickly because they burn with such extravagant brightness. And there is something strangely peaceful in that knowledge too, because it gives their light a feeling of preciousness, as if each blue-white star were a brief song sung beautifully into the dark before giving way, in ages beyond counting, to some later and softer form. And as we drift among them in this relaxing story, notice how their color changes the mood of space itself, because where the red giants of earlier chapters glowed like embers and hearths, these hotter stars seem more like moonlit snow, like polished silver, like winter lanterns hanging in a still and windless night. And the mind, already nearing sleep, can rest with either kind of brightness without needing to choose between warmth and coolness. Because both are gentle here, both are softened by distance, both belong to the same great cosmic hush. There are regions in galaxies where many such hot young stars gather together, and their combined radiance can make whole clouds glow, turning nearby gas into luminous blue-white or rose-colored mist, so that a single cluster of youthful stars may light an entire nursery around itself. And perhaps that is one of the sweetest scientific images to carry into sleep, the thought of a handful of bright young suns illuminating the soft cloud from which they emerged, as though the universe were lighting a room from within just after entering it. Some of these stars are so luminous that even from far across the galaxy, they still stand out plainly, and others shine brilliantly within neighboring galaxies, helping to shape the light of those remote spiral arms and star-forming regions. But tonight, none of them needs to feel distant in a lonely way, because this is a nighttime story, and in stories made for sleep, far things become intimate simply by being held in imagination, so that a hot blue supergiant in a remote stellar field may feel as close and familiar as a lamp beyond a curtain. And one of the most calming truths about these stars is that their brightness, though immense, is also ordered, born from the same steady processes that govern all stars: gravity drawing inward, pressure pushing outward, fusion quietly turning matter into light in the patient balance that allows a star to shine for ages. And there is comfort in that order, comfort in knowing that beneath the splendor of cosmic brightness, there is rhythm, structure, and a kind of enduring poise. Even the light itself arrives calmly, crossing the dark over years and centuries and longer spans still, never rushing, never skipping, only continuing until at last it enters a sky above a sleeping world and becomes part of a human moment of rest, which means that in some quiet way these stars are participating in your evening now, contributing their pale, ancient gleam to the long chain of soft perceptions that help the mind let go. And so, as this bedtime story continues to guide you toward deeper and deeper rest, let these blue-white stars gather around you in imagination as a cool and peaceful canopy. Let their brilliance become fine silver dust. Let their youthful heat translate into clear and delicate stillness. And let every thought that remains from the day loosen a little more under their distant shine. This is a sleep story, after all, not a lesson to hold tightly. And these facts about the brightest stars need not remain exact, because sleep does not ask for exactness, only for gentleness, only for repetition, only for the slow and steady dimming of effort. So let the names and temperatures fade now. Let the categories blur, and keep only the feeling of cool fires hanging in the dark, of bright blue stars that are somehow restful, of immense radiance made quiet by the long mercy of distance. And as you float beneath them, farther from the day than before, perhaps you can feel how naturally the universe invites surrender, not as loss, but as softness, not as emptiness, but as spaciousness, until these calm blue fires no longer seem like separate objects at all, but like a single silver field spread above the sleeping mind, delicate and immense, and beautifully still. And under that field, you may drift onward with no effort, no urgency, and no need to remain awake. While the brightest, cool stars in the universe keep their silent watch, and the night grows deeper, softer, and wonderfully kind. And now, as this sleep story drifts onward through the calm blue fires of distant stars and into an even softer region of the night, let yourself settle into the soothing thought that not all brightness in the universe stays exactly the same, because some of the most beautiful lights rise and fall very gently over time, as if the cosmos itself were breathing in slow and peaceful rhythms. And among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is the quiet truth that certain stars are variable stars, which means their light changes in a steady way, sometimes swelling softly brighter, sometimes easing softly dimmer, never in a hurry, never in a way that asks anything of you, but with the patient grace of a lantern whose glow becomes fuller and then more delicate again as the long night passes. And here, in this bedtime story, that fact becomes a kind of lullaby, because there is deep comfort in rhythms that repeat, in patterns that are gentle enough to trust. And some of these stars change brightness because they expand and contract, their outer layers rising and settling like a calm breath, while others vary because two stars circle one another, and from far away, one may partly pass in front of the other, causing the visible light to soften and return in a slow celestial rhythm. And each of these causes, though different in science, feels similar in the sleepy imagination, like waves reaching a quiet shore and drawing back again without noise. Perhaps that is why variable stars belong so naturally in a relaxing story for deep sleep, because the mind on the edge of sleep also moves in pulses, becoming clear for a moment, then hazy, then clear again, until the whole bright machinery of daytime thought begins to dim in a peaceful cycle of its own. There are famous kinds of variable stars that have helped astronomers understand the scale of the universe, because their repeating patterns of brightness reveal clues about how luminous they truly are, and from that gentle clue great distances can be estimated, which means that some of the brightest changing stars have served not only as beautiful objects in the sky, but also as quiet measuring lights, patient cosmic candles, helping humanity sense the breadth of the dark without ever needing to shout about it. And even that is a very calming truth, that knowledge in the universe often comes not from suddenness, but from careful listening to repetition. Imagine now, in this nighttime story, a field of pearl-like stars spread across the dark, each one brightening and softening at its own unhurried pace, some with slower cycles, some with steadier ones, and all of them together, creating not confusion but harmony, because distance blends their separate changes into a kind of silent music, a luminous rhythm too slow for alarm and too beautiful for wakefulness. And if you let yourself float there for a while, the whole field may begin to feel less like astronomy and more like a great sleeping harbor, where every lantern on the water rises and falls with the same calm tide. Some variable stars are red giants in later chapters of life, their surfaces swelling and settling over long spans, while others are hotter and brighter, pulsing with reliable precision. And this variety is lovely to rest beside because it reminds us that the universe does not keep only one tempo, but many. Yet all of them are slower than worry, wider than urgency, and gentle enough to be held by a tired mind. And as this gentle bedtime narration continues, you may notice how naturally these changing lights echo the body itself. The inhale and exhale, the soft rise of the chest, the gradual release of the shoulders, the way awareness becomes lighter as the body becomes heavier. And so these stars, though unimaginably far away, begin to feel intimate, almost companionable, as if they were keeping time with your rest. There are also stars whose brightness shifts because great clouds of material around them move and thin and gather, veiling and unveiling the light in gradual ways. And that too can be imagined softly here, like a lamp behind sheer curtains, glowing more clearly for a moment, and then retreating into haze again. And this image belongs perfectly to a sleep story, because sleep itself often feels like passing behind curtains, leaving the sharper outlines of the world outside, while a gentler glow remains. In some places, whole populations of stars can be studied through their small, repeating changes, allowing hidden order to emerge from what at first seems like scattered light. And there is peace in that idea as well. The idea that patient watching reveals pattern, that even flickering brightness is not chaos, but cadence. And so, as you continue to fall asleep, let these variable stars become your soft companions in the dark. Let their pearl glow rise and fade at the edges of thought. Let each subtle pulse smooth away one more fragment of the day, and let the scientific beauty of their changing light become wonderfully simple now, no longer a matter of names or categories, only of rhythm, only of softness, only of the universe breathing in long, luminous intervals. This is a gentle bedtime journey, and here in this calm region of slowly changing stars, nothing needs to remain fixed in order to be peaceful, because even change can be serene when it unfolds with enough patience. And perhaps that is the quiet gift of this chapter, the reminder that brightness may ebb and return without trouble, that light may pulse without strain, that the cosmos is full of motions so smooth they feel like rest itself. And as those pearl-like stars continue their slow and faithful cycles, they may begin to blur together into one tender breathing field of light, a wide and silver hush above you, rising and falling so gradually that you no longer follow individual stars at all, but only the calm pattern they make together, until even that pattern softens and drifts away, and you sink farther into deep sleep beneath a sky that changes only gently, only beautifully, only enough to carry you deeper into dream, as this sleep story carries you farther into the soft country of dreams, where every bright thing has become calmer than it was before, and every fact now arrives like a feather settling on still water. Let yourself drift toward another gentle wonder among the brightest objects in the universe, the quiet beauty of stars that do not shine alone, because some of the loveliest lights in the cosmos exist in pairs, two stars bound together by gravity, circling one another in a slow and faithful dance. And among the most relaxing facts of all is the simple truth that companionship is written into the heavens, that even very bright stars often travel through the dark with a partner near them, turning together in silence across distances so immense that their motion appears almost perfectly still. And here, in this bedtime story made for deep sleep, that image can be wonderfully soothing, because a binary star system is not a collision or a struggle, but a balance, a mutual turning, two luminous bodies moving around a shared center, as if the universe itself were demonstrating how brightness can be gentled by harmony. Some of the brightest stars in the night sky belong to such pairs or larger families, and though from Earth they may look like a single point of light, careful observation reveals that they are companions, sometimes similar, sometimes quite different. One perhaps hotter and whiter, the other softer and warmer. Yet together they create a richer glow than either might alone. And this is a lovely thought to carry into sleep, that even in the great dark, light can be relational, can be shared, can be held in orbit rather than scattered alone. As we continue this relaxing story, imagine now a pair of stars suspended in a wide velvet field, one pale silver, one faintly golden, both moving slowly around their common center with a patience beyond measuring. And though their dance may take days or years or far longer, from our peaceful distance, it becomes a single impression of steadiness, a quiet turning so smooth that it feels more like breathing than motion, more like a lullaby than a calculation. Some binary stars are close enough that their gravity shapes each other's outer layers, drawing streams of matter in graceful arcs. And yet, even this, in the softened light of a nighttime story, need not feel sharp or dramatic, because all such processes are carried out over long spans and vast distances, translated by remoteness into tenderness, until what remains for the sleepy mind is only the image of light passing gently between companions, like the exchange of lantern glow across a dark garden path. There are also eclipsing binary systems, where one star passes in front of the other from our viewpoint, causing the brightness to dim and return in calm, repeating cycles. And perhaps this is one of the most restful facts in all of astronomy, that some stars create their own bedtime rhythm, waxing and softening with such reliability that astronomers can predict the changes as surely as the return of evening, while a listener drifting toward sleep can simply feel the pattern without needing to name it, can let the rise and fall of those twin lights become one more quiet pulse in the background of the mind. And beyond, these are brilliant double stars separated by greater distances, shining side by side in patient companionship, each one burning according to its own nature, while still belonging to the same celestial home. And there is something deeply peaceful in that arrangement too, because it reminds us that closeness in the universe takes many forms, some intimate and circling, some spacious and serene, some woven tightly, some gently parallel, and all of them held together by the same invisible grace of gravity. In this gentle bedtime journey, gravity itself no longer feels like force so much as belonging, the soft rule that keeps bright things from wandering too far from one another, the invisible thread that allows the cosmos to create pairs, families, and quiet repetitions. And as your own thoughts drift farther from the day, perhaps that idea becomes comforting in a human way as well. The idea that rest is a kind of orbit, a slow return to center, a peaceful circling back toward stillness. There are systems so luminous that one companion may outshine the other many times over, while in others, the two stars contribute more evenly, creating a blended brilliance that seems almost pearly from afar. And sometimes their combined light can help scientists learn about stellar mass, size, and motion. Yet, tonight, none of that needs to remain technical, because this is a calming narration, not a lecture, and the science may simply become atmosphere now. A soft background, understanding that the universe is full of paired lights, moving with exquisite patience through the dark. So picture them more clearly for a moment. These twin stars in a silent orbit, one drifting forward as the other leans away, then both continuing their long turning around a shared, unseen point. No hurry in them, no strain, only continuity, only the calm geometry of companionship written in light. And let that image settle over you like a gentle bedtime spell. Because if even the brightest stars can move this slowly, this smoothly, this faithfully, then nothing in your own small world needs to be hurried tonight. And as this sleep story draws the chapter softly inward, let the twin lights blur a little at the edges. Let their orbit become wider and softer. Let their repeated dimming and brightening merge into a single calm rhythm until they are no longer two distinct stars in the mind, but one tender pulse of shared radiance floating far away in the dark. A quiet reminder that even among the brightest objects in the universe, there are partnerships, balances, and silent circles of trust. And with that thought, you may drift a little deeper now, falling asleep beneath a sky where even the farthest lights are not alone, but turning together in peace as this sleep story continues to carry you farther inward and farther outward at the same time, into that soft region where dreams and astronomy begin to feel like the very same thing. Let yourself drift toward a warmer kind of brightness now, the gentle radiance of red and amber giant stars, those vast and luminous suns that seem to glow not with the cool silver fire of youth, but with the mellow richness of evening. And among the most relaxing facts about the brightest objects in the universe is the quiet truth that some stars become especially beautiful as they grow older, expanding into enormous gentle spheres whose light feels less like a spark and more like a lantern shaded in silk. In this bedtime story, where every image is meant to loosen the day's last knots and guide you toward deep sleep, these giant stars arrive like cosmic hearths, floating alone or in small, quiet company, warming the surrounding dark with colors of honey, copper, rose, and faded gold. And one of the loveliest scientific truths about them is that many shine so brightly not because they are the hottest stars, but because they have grown so large that even their softer surface glow spreads across an immense area, turning breadth itself into brightness, turning calm size into visible light. And that idea can be wonderfully soothing tonight, because it reminds us that brilliance does not always come from intensity, but sometimes from gentleness extended over a wide and patient space, from a star becoming broad enough to glow like a whole room rather than a candle flame. Imagine one now, a giant star suspended before you in the dark, its color somewhere between ember and apricot, its light not sharp at all, but rounded and tender. And feel how naturally the mind rests beside it, because red giants seem to belong to sleep in a special way, as though they were made to be seen only with softened thoughts and half-dreaming eyes. Some of these stars have outer layers so expanded that, if placed where our sun rests, they would stretch astonishingly far across the inner reaches of a planetary system. And yet, from our serene distance, they appear as only warm points, which is another quiet comfort of the universe, that even what is vast can arrive gently. Even what is enormous can feel intimate when held far enough away. There are giant stars whose light has traveled for many years simply to be part of a human night, and others so large and luminous that they seem to pulse or shed a little of their outer material into surrounding space, enriching the darkness with the soft beginnings of future clouds and future stars, so that even in their later chapters they remain generous, still giving light, still giving substance, still becoming part of what comes next. And perhaps that is one of the calmest facts of all, that the universe allows many of its brightest objects to age beautifully, to enter broader and warmer forms, rather than merely burning ever harder. And in this relaxing story, that truth becomes almost like a lullaby, because it suggests that change need not always sharpen, that growth may also soften, may also broaden, may also become more golden and kind. Some amber giants glow with a steady warmth, while others vary a little, brightening and dimming in long, unhurried rhythms, as if breathing in their sleep. And the mind nearing dreams can rest with that image very easily, because a slowly changing giant star feels almost like the sky itself is breathing with you, rising and settling in deep, patient cycles that ask for nothing but surrender. Round some of these stars, there may drift faint shells of gas or dust, delicate veils lit softly by the star's own glow. And that too belongs beautifully in a gentle bedtime journey, because it means that even the space around a bright object can become part of its calm radiance, part of its halo, part of the atmosphere of rest. Now imagine yourself gliding through a quiet region where many such stars are scattered across the dark, each one a different shade of warmth, some more rose, some more bronze, some almost golden, and all of them so slow and dignified that time itself seems to stretch and recline around them, while the black velvet between them is not empty or lonely, but spacious in the kindest way, like the dark of a peaceful room after the lamps have all been lowered. This is a nighttime story, after all, and here the brightest objects in the universe do not compete for attention, but take turns soothing the mind, one after another. And these amber giants are especially good at that, because their warmth feels like the final light of evening, the last safe glow before the whole world gives itself over to rest. And as you continue to fall asleep, let their vastness stop being something to picture exactly and become instead a feeling, a broad, warm presence hanging behind your closed eyes, a field of great old stars glowing in silence, each one patient, each one expansive, each one quietly teaching that radiance can mellow with age and still remain beautiful. Let their colors blur now into soft washes of copper and rose. Let their enormous surfaces become only a tender haze. Let any names or categories fade away and keep only the sense of drifting among ancient warm lights that have already learned how to shine without hurry, how to fill the dark without disturbing it, how to be bright and restful at once. And under their peaceful amber glow, this sleep story may carry you deeper still, past thought, past memory, past all the bright little concerns of the day, into a place where the universe itself seems half asleep, holding its giant stars like banked embers in an endless and gentle night. And now, as this sleep story continues to drift through the warm afterglow of amber giants and into an even softer depth of the night, let yourself move gently toward another peaceful wonder among the brightest objects in the universe, the great supergiant stars, those immense and radiant suns whose light can cross astonishing distances and still arrive as something tender, something hushed, something that belongs beautifully inside a bedtime story. And among the most relaxing facts about them is the simple truth that some of the brightest stars ever known are not bright because they are racing or striving, but because they have grown into vast luminous presences like quiet crowns of light resting above the dark. And here, in this relaxing story made to help you fall asleep, they do not appear fierce or overwhelming, but calm and regal, suspended so far away that even their unimaginable scale has been translated by distance into softness, until a star that would dwarf familiar worlds seems no more troubling than a lantern seen through layers of evening mist. Some supergiants shine with pale blue-white clarity, others with creamy gold, others with rosy or ruby warmth. And the beauty of that variety is how gently it changes the feeling of space itself, because the universe does not offer only one kind of brightness, but many, each with its own mood, each with its own quiet voice. And in this nighttime story, those voices do not speak loudly, but blend into a low and steady chorus that carries the mind farther from waking thought. Imagine now that you are drifting through a region where these great stars are scattered like royal lamps across the velvet dark, each one large beyond easy imagining, each one radiating outward in all directions. And yet, from where you float, they seem perfectly composed, perfectly still, as if they have all the time in the universe to shine. And perhaps they do. One of the calmest scientific truths about such stars is that brightness is not always about hardness or heat alone, but also about size, about how much glowing surface a star presents to the dark. And so a cooler supergiant can still be extraordinarily luminous simply because it has become so broad and expansive. Its light spread over a giant sphere, which is a lovely thought to rest beside tonight. That radiance may come not only from intensity, but from spaciousness, from breadth, from becoming large enough to glow gently over an immense area. Some of these stars live relatively short lives in cosmic terms, spending their energy lavishly. And yet, even that can feel peaceful here, because from our far and dreamlike remove, we do not meet them in haste, only in presence, only in the graceful fact that for a while they shine magnificently in the dark and fill their quiet neighborhoods with light. Round some of the most luminous stars, there drift faint winds of matter, flowing outward so gradually that they form halos, veils, or subtle envelopes of gas. And in this gentle bedtime passage, it is easy to imagine those as soft shawls of light wrapped around the stars. Luminous breath rising slowly into the surrounding space, making even the emptiness nearby feel touched, warmed, and included. And if you notice your own breathing now, slow and natural and easy, perhaps these vast stars begin to feel strangely companionable, because they too seem to exist in states of patient balance, holding themselves for long ages between gravity drawing inward and pressure moving outward. A deep cosmic equilibrium that turns the hidden work of physics into visible serenity. There are luminous blue variables, stars so brilliant and so massive that they sometimes change in brightness and shed material into space. And yet, from this distance, even their changes seem graceful, like the adjustment of a silk curtain in a still room, not an interruption, but part of the atmosphere, part of the long, quiet life of a radiant being. In a calming narration such as this, the facts need not remain sharp or technical, because their real gift is the feeling they create. The feeling that the universe contains lights so vast and beautiful that ordinary language softens around them, that the mind stops trying to measure and instead simply floats. Some supergiants will one day transform and leave behind new patterns of light in the cosmos. But tonight, we do not rush toward any ending, because this gentle bedtime journey is only interested in the peace of the present glow, the current hush, the soft certainty that these bright crowns are shining now across remote expanses, and their light, old and patient, is arriving gently enough to belong to your rest. So let them gather above you in imagination, some cool as silver, some warm as rose gold, some pale as candlelight behind frost, and let their enormous brilliance become increasingly velvety as sleep deepens, until they are no longer distinct stars at all, but a high, quiet ceiling of luminous presence arching over the sleeping mind. This sleep story, this bedtime story, this slow and relaxing story for deep sleep can carry you beneath them without effort now. And you do not need to remember which stars were hottest or largest or farthest, because sleep does not ask for facts to be held tightly, only for them to become gentle stepping stones into dream. And these supergiant stars are perfect for that. Perfect because they are bright without urgency, immense without pressure, majestic without noise. And so, as the chapter draws softly onward, let the quiet crowns of the most luminous stars dim a little at the edges. Let their halos widen into soft circles. Let their colors blur into one calm and floating tapestry of silver, gold, and rose. And let that tapestry recede with exquisite slowness into the dark behind your closed eyes, until all that remains is a feeling of vast brightness made kind by distance, and the universe itself seems to bow its great shining head and keep watch while you drift ever more peacefully, ever more deeply into sleep, as this sleep story continues beneath the quiet crowns of the most luminous stars. Let yourself drift a little lower through the velvet dark toward a gentler and more familiar kind of brightness, because among the brightest objects that grace a night sky, there are also wandering worlds, planets that do not make their own light, but receive it tenderly and return it in softened silver, pearl, or gold. And among the most relaxing facts in the universe is the quiet truth that some of the brightest lights we notice are reflections, calm borrowed glows offered back to the dark with perfect patience, which is a lovely thing to rest beside now, because it means brightness does not always require effort, does not always require blazing from within, but can also arise from stillness, from presence, from simply turning a peaceful face toward a distant sun. And here, in this bedtime story made for deep sleep and gentle bedtime calm, the wandering worlds appear like floating lanterns adrift in an endless sea of shadow, each one moving in its own slow path, each one carrying its own color and mood, some wrapped in pale clouds, some ringed with fine luminous dust, some hidden beneath softer veils of atmosphere that scatter light, until the whole planet seems to glow like a pearl behind silk. Perhaps that is why the brightest planets have always felt so soothing to human beings, because unlike stars, they often shine with a steadier, quieter presence, less like sparks and more like polished lamps. And when they hang above the horizon or drift through the depths of night, they seem not to pierce the darkness, but to rest within it, as though the sky itself were carrying them gently from one side of sleep to the other. Imagine now one of those bright worlds turning slowly before you, its day side bathed in the light of its star, its night side dissolving into shadow, so soft it seems made of velvet, and all across its cloud tops the light spreads in muted silver, in cream, in pale gold, until the whole sphere becomes a calm lantern of reflected radiance. And there is something profoundly peaceful in that image, because a planet does not hurry to shine. It simply receives and releases, receives and releases, like breathing, like the tide, like the mind itself, as it slips farther from waking thought and deeper into dream. Some of the brightest wandering worlds are bright because their cloud layers are especially reflective, sending back much of the light that reaches them. And others glimmer because of frozen surfaces, pale hazes, or broad rings that catch and scatter starlight in delicate arcs. And this too belongs beautifully in a relaxing story, because it reminds us that the universe creates beauty not only through fire and fusion, but also through mist, ice, dust, and patient reflection, through surfaces that know how to soften light rather than intensify it. There are giant planets with bands of cloud wrapped around them like slow brushstrokes. And if you imagine them now in the deep silence of space, their vastness does not need to feel overwhelming at all, because from a dreamlike distance, even a giant world becomes intimate, a quiet globe hanging in stillness, surrounded perhaps by faint moons, or rings so subtle they seem like whispered halos. And these details, though scientific in truth, become almost lullaby-like here, because they do not ask to be measured, only felt. And then there are worlds that glow with a gentler reddish or amber tint, not from heat alone, but from the way their atmospheres hold and scatter light. And such planets can feel like banked embers drifting through the cosmic night, warming nothing, disturbing nothing, only adding another shade to the grand and peaceful palette of the heavens. Some wander close to their stars, bathing in brightness and gleaming strongly to distant observers, while others travel farther out and shine more faintly. But all of them move according to the same calm order, tracing paths so reliable and so unhurried that the ancient sky itself seems to breathe through them. And perhaps that is one of the most comforting truths of all. That motion in the universe is often slow enough to feel like stillness, ordered enough to feel like trust. In this nighttime story, you do not need to think of planets as cold stones or distant places, but as rounded vessels of light and shadow, each one turning through a silence so complete that even your thoughts begin to quiet in sympathy. And if some are brighter than others, that brightness becomes simply another form of gentleness, another soft note in the music of the dark. Imagine now that you are floating among many such wandering worlds, some large and pearl bright, some small and amber, some ringed in faint silver, some wrapped in layers of cloud that make their glow especially soft, and all of them drifting with serene patience around faraway suns, while the space between them remains spacious and kind, never empty in a lonely way, only open, only restful, only deep enough to hold every gleam without crowding it. And as this relaxing story continues, the planets begin to feel less like separate objects and more like a procession of low lanterns passing through a corridor of velvet night, each one reflecting just enough brightness to guide the mind a little farther away from the day, a little deeper into that state where names no longer matter, where facts become atmosphere, where astronomy itself turns into a cradle. So let the bright wandering worlds grow softer now. Let their cloud bands blur. Let their rings widen into pale halos. Let their reflected light become silkier and dimmer until they are only rounded glows drifting across the inside of sleep. And beneath their quiet procession, you may continue to fall asleep with no effort at all, carried onward by the calm truth that even borrowed light can be beautiful, even distant worlds can feel companionable, and even the brightest objects in the universe may choose, in the end, to shine with perfect gentleness. And now, as this sleep story reaches its final gentle shore, let yourself drift without effort into the quietest part of the night, where all the brightest objects in the universe that have accompanied you so patiently begin to soften, dim, and settle into the far distance, not disappearing, but growing tender enough to become part of the dark itself. And this bedtime story, this nighttime story, this relaxing story made for deep sleep and calming narration asks nothing more of you now than to float, to loosen, to allow every thought to become lighter than starlight and slower than the turning of a distant world. Because you have already traveled so far through silver galaxies, warm giant stars, glowing nebulae, quiet clusters, reflective planets, and the ancient hush of early light. And now all of them gather around you one last time as a soft and luminous farewell. A final procession of calm facts turned into dream, a final gentle reminder that the universe is full of brightness, and yet never asks you to stay awake for it. Imagine, if you wish, that you are resting in a perfectly still sea of velvet dark, with no up or down, no urgency, no edges to hold, only softness, and far around you, the brightest lights in existence remain suspended like lanterns in an endless sleeping hall. The blue-white stars now pale as frost behind closed eyes. The amber giants warm as hidden embers beneath ash, the galaxies broad as faint brushed silk, the quasars reduced to tiny ancient pearls, the nebulae loosened into veils so delicate they barely seem separate from the dream. And even the wandering worlds, those gentle borrowed lights, now moving so slowly and quietly that their motion feels like silence itself, one of the most peaceful truths of all, and perhaps the last to carry with you tonight, is that the universe does not become less beautiful when seen through drowsiness, but more beautiful because sleep smooths the sharpness from distance and scale, turning the vast into the intimate, the brilliant into the tender, the scientific into the soothing, until every fact we have gathered becomes not a lesson, but a lullaby, not a point to remember, but a rhythm to rest inside. The brightest objects in the universe are still shining now, far beyond the sleeping roofs of Earth, far beyond clouds and clocks and names, and they will go on shining, whether anyone watches them or not, which is a deeply comforting thing, because it means you do not need to keep vigil. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to hold the sky together with attention. You may simply let it be vast and luminous on its own, while you sink deeper into your own peaceful dark. And perhaps the gentlest image of all is this, that the cosmos is like a great house at night, in which every room has been slowly dimmed, every bright lamp lowered, every silver window covered in soft gauze, until only the faintest and kindest glow remains in the corridors, enough to guide, never enough to disturb. And through that immense and sleeping house, the stars keep their slow places. The galaxies rest in their quiet clusters. The oldest light lingers like a memory in the walls. And all of it together becomes a cradle for the mind, broad enough to hold every fading thought and every unfinished feeling, until both can loosen and dissolve. So now let the chapter of wakefulness close. Let every bright fact become softer than before. Let Sirius and Venus and distant quasars and giant elliptical galaxies and glowing stellar nurseries all drift outward together, farther and farther, as though they are moving toward the horizon of a dream, until the only thing left near you is their calm, their shared atmosphere of patience, their immense, untroubled silence. This gentle bedtime outro is not here to conclude with force, only to fade, the way starlight fades at dawn, or the way a last thought fades just before deep sleep fully takes it. And so even the language now can begin to slow and blur, becoming rounder, quieter, more spacious, as though each sentence were a breath exhaled into cool night air. You have done enough for this day. And now the universe itself seems to know it, lowering its bright lanterns one by one, not extinguishing them, only drawing a veil over them, so that the most luminous things in existence no longer gleam as separate wonders, but merge into one broad and peaceful field, a soft celestial hush beyond the mind, beyond effort, beyond remembering. And if any small part of you is still listening, let it listen only the way a sleeping shore listens to a distant tide, without needing to answer, without needing to stay alert. Because this sleep story can carry you the rest of the way now. This bedtime story can become a warm current under thought. This relaxing story can become almost nothing at all. Only a murmur, only a drift, only the sense that above and around and far beyond the brightest objects in the universe continue their patient shining, while you are free to rest completely. So let the stars grow dimmer, let the galaxies become mist, let the planets become pearls, let the oldest light become a silver blanket laid across the dark, and let yourself sink beneath it, slowly, comfortably, irresistibly, until there is no more journey, no more chapter, no more distance to cross, only the deep and gentle quiet where every bright thing has softened into dream, and where you, at last, can fall fully asleep. Continuity log. Cosmic setting. The journey has reached its final resting place in a vast, velvety darkness, where all previously visited bright cosmic objects have receded into one soft, universal glow. Narrator's distance, no fixed distance now, as the perspective has dissolved into a calm, dreamlike stillness beyond measurement. Story time. The voyage has fully faded into deep sleep, and the story has become a final whisper at the edge of unconscious rest.